were entitled Where Everything Goes Wrong by the Reverend Elea Kemler. 6 weeks into the church year, I realized that I am the minister of a church where things usually go wrong. This morning, the copy machine jams repeatedly. The bulletin describing the order of worship has been copied with the second page first and also upside down. No one has remembered to turn on the lights in the sanctuary before the service, so it is dark because it is raining outside. The microphone is buzzing, imagine that, and lets out a painful, high-pitched squeal which makes people wince. Again, imagine that. We have just started the service when someone runs up with a bunch of flowers for the altar, just as someone else runs up with one of the silk arrangements we keep for the mornings when no one brings real flowers. There's laughter as the two flower bearers meet at the altar. They decide on the real flowers, and things settle down for a while until a baby starts crying, which sets off another baby crying. I try to speak over the wailing as their fathers hustle them down the aisle and try to distract them in the back. Usually I love watching the tall, gentle fathers who bounce their babies in backpacks at the rear of the sanctuary. But today I am annoyed. I want it to be quiet and holy and lovely, and things are definitely not shaping up that way. The woman who's helping with the worship gets up and instead of giving the announcements, now introduces the candle lighting time, which comes later. People call out, "Not yet!" More laughter. The organist starts playing the wrong hymn, and a couple of choir members yell over the din for him to stop. A few minutes later, during the period of prayerful silence, he accidentally falls into the keyboard, causing the organ to emit horrible, gassy noises, shrieks, and snorts of laughter. Nothing is funnier than gas. All pretense of Sunday morning decorum is lost, and something inside me, some furious, bossy desire to have my worship service go according to my plan, finally slides free, and I can laugh with them. This will be the first of many times that I laugh at Sunday morning details gone awry. It's also the first of many times that I imagine that God is watching, looking up or down or over or out at us from wherever God sits on Sunday mornings, slightly amazed and maybe at a loss for words, because we, God's people, are so funny and wonderful and odd all at the same time. In moments like these, I imagine God as a sturdy old woman with her hands on her hips, or perhaps as a rabbi pulling on his long white beard. I imagine a God shaking their head and saying, "What are they doing over there? This is what they call church? What were they thinking?" But I also imagine a God who is touched and maybe a little honored by our efforts, however halting, to worship and give praise. Imagine a God who is moved by our efforts to take care of one another and to name the things we believe are holy. There's a warmth in this congregation that is new to me. Simple friendliness that shines through the fumblings and failures. Love that makes the ragged edges smooth. I've always wanted to believe, really believe, that our mistakes aren't the most important part of us. I've always wanted to believe that kindness and compassion matter more than anything. And I sense that I can learn that here. So the story I'm going to share now is actually a true story. According at least to my professor at seminary who shared it, and we know that professors at seminaries wouldn't ever exaggerate a story for effect. So he was a graduate school at Yale, I believe, doing his doctorate in something related to religion, and he was getting married. He had proposed to and been accepted to a young Catholic woman. He is most completely and assuredly a Calvinist Protestant. And so she accepted, and they were going to get married, and he asked one of his favorite professors, who actually also lived, I don't know what they call them, but you know the grown-up who lives in a dorm and sort of moderates, everything that's going on. And this individual was Henry Nouwen. And have any of you ever heard of him? Okay, so Henry Nouwen is now died. He died in 1996. I'll tell you more about him later. But is one of the most venerated and well-known spiritual teachers of the last century. So he asked Henry Nouwen, who is a priest and a monk, to officiate the service, because, his bride-to-be is Catholic. And Henry Nouwen says, yeah, on the condition that you ask no questions about what I'm going to do, and you don't interfere in any way about how I'm going to conduct the service. Okay. So the day comes, and as my professor described it to me, the bride's side, when they do that thing where the bride's folks sit on one side, the bride's side was packed to overflowing, and the groom's side was pretty sparse. And as they're waiting, in comes Father Nouwen, dressed as a reindeer. Antlers, nose, furry, the whole bit. Father Nouwen recites the Mass, he does all the things, and if you've been to Catholic weddings, sometimes they can be quite long, and he finally gets to the communion part, which is the good part, and he announces that everyone is welcome to come up to, the altar rail and receive communion. So everybody starts coming up, and the ushers are helping them, and including the members of my professor's family, which included an elderly aunt who was probably halfway down the path to complete dementia at the time. But, she was excited about this, so she came up and everyone else came up. And as she finished taking communion, she came up to my professor, who was standing there waiting, and whispered in a very loud voice, "The reindeer gave me a cracker." I'm sad to say that marriage didn't last. His second wife is also a devoted Calvinist, and they've been married for many decades. I promised to tell you a little bit about Father Nouwen, one of whose, I'll say this, he's written many books, but one of my favorites is called Clowning in Rome. He was invited. He was born in the Netherlands, and he taught in many elite universities here in the United States and elsewhere. And he was invited to spend 5 months in Rome teaching at the American College there. So he went and had this experience that really changed his spirituality and his perspective. He said, and I'm going to read this directly because I couldn't possibly paraphrase it. It wasn't the gorgeously robed cardinals or the splendor of the Vatican and the many churches in Vatican City that really changed his heart. It was what he called the clowns of Rome. Those peripheral folks who by their humble, saintly lives evoke a smile or awaken hope, even in a city terrorized by kidnapping and street violence. Some of you may remember in the 70s there were in fact kidnappings and there was a lot of turbulence in Rome and in other cities. And what he saw were these folks who were serving, the folks that are often forgotten, and doing it with a joy and a smile and even silliness that came from having a deep spiritual connection, feeling that joy and ministering or serving from that joy. He says, I came to feel in this full, imposing, venerable, and busy city, there must be a very deep desire to live out the other side of our being. The side that wants to play, dance, smile, and do many other useless things. Perhaps like officiate weddings dressed like a reindeer. Maybe you've heard the expression, God has a sense of humor. Now, I know I'm using that word a lot this morning, and I'm not pushing a particular belief, but when it comes to religion jokes, God has a really huge part. So, I'm not a great joke teller. I start to laugh even before I start. We'll get there. So, why don't Episcopalians go to orgies? Too many thank you notes. It's a good one, right? Bacon proves that God has a real sense of humor. He, of course, jokes are very sexist. God creates the most delicious of meats and then tell God's chosen people you can't eat them. Why don't we get silly more often in church? Why don't we see more of the time that these faith traditions that draw us in and that give us comfort and that help us be part of community that has meaning is also part of silliness? If we, as I said earlier this morning, if you and I are absolutely, completely, totally welcome here, why does it feel like sometimes that part isn't welcome? One of the reasons people, Catholic or non-Catholic or non-religious, appreciate Father Nowlin's words is because he's very humble. He's the one who coined, or at least made famous, the term wounded healer. He's very vulnerable. He talks about himself without any sense of grandeur or pomp or anything like that. And as you heard from his story, he's not afraid to laugh at himself. We have in our own faith tradition a group called the Faithful Fools. Have you ever heard of them? They started in San Francisco 25 years ago, and it was a meeting between a Unitarian Universalist minister, a woman, and a Sufi mystic spiritual director, both with this idea that clowning, that being in that place, is a space where we can meet one another on equal terms. Does that make sense? So I'm up here in this awesome place, right? Above, and I know that's for acoustics and for all kinds of other reasons. But the Faithful Fools, they each create their clown or maybe more than one, but the Faithful Fools do street ministry and street retreats, and they mostly minister to folks in the Tenderloin section, which is a section with a great deal of social distress. And so they meet people where people are. Some of us aspire to be heroes, right? But when there used to be circuses, of course, that's pretty old-fashioned and not a great model, but when there used to be circuses, we might go to see the heroic acts, right? The incredible trapeze artists, or the person who was so muscular and strong they would, lift the ridiculous barbells. But the clowns, whether you're scared of them or whether you love them, were on our level. They fell down, they did dumb things, they made mistakes, they wore funny hats. So I'm here this morning to encourage us to inhabit that place together. And that could be bad jokes. That could be a place of allowing our bodies, because belly laughs, we don't decide, okay, I think I'm going to have a belly laugh now. It's not a rational decision. When I was a kid, the thing that would make me laugh, like falling down laughing, was the term cocker spaniel. I had no idea why that was so funny. It just sounded funny. Cocker spaniel. Belly laughing is our body healing itself. It reduces our stress, hearing a funny joke, watching a funny movie, watching somebody who is genuinely, it heals our stress. It changes things. No matter what we may be carrying, because it's not all laughter, but it's not all pain either. I said in my story that people like me, or people who are in the same kind of work that I am, we tend to take ourselves very seriously. Because it is serious. We're with people when they're at the end of their lives, or very ill, dealing with loss. That's what life and death are. But we're also with people when babies are being dedicated, or new faith formations are being launched. One of the last weddings I did was between an 87-year-old and an 85-year-old, who had literally, they'd both been married before, but this was the love of their lives. And it was so beautiful and so hopeful. Our bodies belong here. Our laughter and our tears. Our faithful foolishness belongs here. So, if you're willing, want to loosen up a little bit, find a neighbor, and you have a choice. Either make a really silly face, or tell a joke. And if you make someone laugh, what do you think, Ashley, a $5 Starbucks certificate? Okay, I'll do this. Go. Amen. Ashe. And